My child, if you desire success, listen carefully. There are 3 things you must do, 3 principles of the kingdom that will bring you into divine abundance. He who has ears, let him hear. Number 1. Plant seeds daily. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who scatters seed upon the ground. Mark 4:26. Each day is an opportunity to sow, through your work, your words, and your deeds. Do not withhold your hand in the morning or the evening, for you do not know which seed will prosper. Ecclesiastes 11:6. Sow kindness, and you shall reap kindness. Sow diligence, and you shall reap reward. Sow faith, and you shall walk in miracles. Peter toiled all night and caught nothing, but when I told him, "Cast your net on the right side," he obeyed, and his nets broke from the abundance of fish. Luke 5:4-6. The lesson? Keep sowing, keep trying. Do not grow weary, for in due time you shall reap if you do not faint. Galatians 6:9. The story of Noah, faithfully sowing in obedience. Noah was a righteous man in a corrupt generation. When I told him to build an ark, he obeyed, even though there was no rain in sight. For 120 years he sowed in obedience, enduring ridicule, laboring faithfully. And when the flood came, he and his household were saved. Genesis 6:22. You may not see the results today, but obedience to my word will always bring a harvest. The story of the widow of Zarephath, sowing even in scarcity. There was a widow in Zarephath, with only a handful of flour and a little oil left. She planned to prepare a last meal for herself and her son before they died. But then my prophet Elijah came and said, "Make me a small cake first, and then prepare for yourself and your son." 1 Kings 17:12-13. It seemed unreasonable. How could she give when she had so little? But she sowed in faith. And what happened? Her flour never ran out, her oil never dried up, and she and her household ate throughout the famine. 1 Kings 17:15-16. My child, do not wait for abundance before you sow. Sow in faith, even in lack, and watch me provide beyond measure. He who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, but he who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. 2 Corinthians 9:6. The story of Isaac, sowing in drought. There was famine in the land, and Isaac could have run to Egypt, as many did, but I told him to stay and plant. In the same year he sowed and reaped 100-fold, because my hand was upon him. Genesis 26:1-12. The conditions were not favorable, but my blessing made the difference. Do not wait for the perfect conditions to plant your seeds. Do not say, "I will start when I have more time, more money, more help." Start now. Sow in faith. For when I am with you, the soil will produce even in famine, and your labor will not be in vain. 1 Corinthians 15:58. The story of the Good Samaritan, sowing kindness daily. A certain man was traveling when he was attacked by thieves, left for dead on the roadside. A priest passed by, he did nothing. A Levite saw him, he did nothing. But then came a Samaritan, a man whom the world despised. He stopped, he cared, he gave. He sowed love into a stranger's life, expecting nothing in return. Luke 10:30-35. Love is a seed, mercy is a seed. Each day, you have an opportunity to sow kindness, a word of encouragement, a helping hand, a moment of generosity. It may seem small, but every seed bears fruit. For whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. Galatians 6:7. The story of Hannah, sowing in prayer. Hannah longed for a child, but her womb was closed. Year after year she prayed. She sowed tears upon the altar, and when the time was right, I gave her Samuel, a prophet to the nations. 1 Samuel 1:10-20. Your prayers are seeds. Do not stop praying. Every tear you shed in faith waters the soil of your destiny. The story me, sowing my life for the world. Unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it produces much fruit. John 12:24. I gave my life as a seed, and because of my sacrifice, millions have found salvation. There is no greater love than to lay down one's life for a friend. John 15:13. Sometimes, the seed you sow may feel like a sacrifice, but do not be discouraged. Those who sow in tears will reap in joy. Psalm 126:5. Your labor in the Lord is never in vain. Be not weary in well-doing, for in due season you shall reap if you do not give up. Galatians 6:9. Sow daily. Sow in faith, sow in love, and watch as I bring forth a harvest that you cannot contain. Malachi 3:10. I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Matthew 28:20. Number 2, make sure you are planting on good soil. A sower went out to sow, and some seeds fell on rocky ground, others among thorns, but only those that fell on good soil bore fruit. Matthew 13:3-9. You must choose wisely where you invest your time, energy, and efforts. Are you surrounding yourself with wisdom or with folly? Are you learning, growing, and refining your skills, or are you wasting your days in idleness? David was a shepherd boy, but he spent his days wisely, practicing, preparing, and trusting in the Lord. So when Goliath appeared, he was ready. Because he sowed into the right soil, he reaped victory. 1 Samuel 17. The story of Lot, planting in bad soil. Lot was given a choice. He saw the land of Sodom. It looked fertile, prosperous, full of opportunity, but he did not see the wickedness that lay beneath. He planted his life in a corrupt city, and though he gained wealth, he lost everything when judgment came. Genesis 13:10-13, 19:24-26. His wife turned into a pillar of salt, his home was destroyed, and he left with nothing but regret. Do not be deceived by appearances. Not every green field is good soil. Not every opportunity leads to blessing. Choose your soil wisely, for where you plant will determine what you harvest. The story of the prodigal son, wasting seed in the wrong place. A certain man had 2 sons. The younger took his inheritance and went to a far country, where he wasted his substance on riotous living. He planted his resources in bad soil, on pleasure, on vanity, on reckless indulgence. And when famine came, he had nothing left. Luke 15:11-16. Bad soil will drain you. It will take everything and give nothing in return. But when the son came to himself, he returned to his father's house, where love and provision were abundant. Luke 15:7-24. My child, do not waste your seed in the wrong places. Return to good soil, and I will restore you. The story of Daniel choosing good soil in Babylon. Daniel was taken to a foreign land, a place full of idols and temptation. Yet he purposed in his heart not to defile himself with the king's food. Daniel 1:8. He planted himself in the soil of righteousness, prayer, and obedience. And because of this, I made him 10 times wiser than all the king's magicians and advisors. Daniel 1:20. Even in a corrupt world, you can choose good soil. You can plant your life in truth, integrity, and my presence. Those who plant in righteousness will always rise above those who plant in wickedness. The story of Mary and Martha, choosing the best soil. Martha was distracted with many tasks, but Mary chose the good part. She sat at my feet and listened to my words. Luke 10:38-42. Some people plant their time in endless labor, worrying about many things. But the best soil is my presence. Those who plant in my word will bear fruit that lasts forever. The story of Joseph, sowing in faithfulness. Joseph was sold as a slave, betrayed by his brothers. He had every reason to be bitter, but instead he planted himself in good soil, faithfulness, integrity, and trust in me. And because of this, I was with him, and he prospered in everything he did. Genesis 39:2-5. Even in the lowest place, if you plant yourself in righteousness, I will lift you up. Good soil is not about where you are, it is about who you are becoming. Be faithful in small things, and I will make you ruler over many. Matthew 20:20. How to find good soil. How do you know if your soil is good? Examine it carefully. Does it bear fruit? Are you growing in wisdom, faith, and righteousness? Are you surrounded by godly influences? Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of mockers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night. He is like a tree planted by rivers of water, bearing fruit in its season. Psalm 1:1-3. The story of the early church, planting in unity. The first church devoted themselves to my teaching, to fellowship, to breaking bread, and to prayer. They planted themselves in a community of faith, and because of this, they flourished. Acts 2:42-47. Do not forsake assembling together. Surround yourself with those who encourage you in the faith. Hebrews 10:25. The story of Abraham, leaving bad soil for good. Abraham lived in Ur, a land of idol worship. But when I called him, he left everything behind to seek a land flowing with milk and honey. Because he chose good soil, I made him the father of many nations. Genesis 12:1-3. Sometimes you must leave bad soil behind to find the land I have prepared for you. Do not be afraid to walk away from unfruitful places. Follow me and I will establish you. My child, where are you planting? Are you sowing into the world or into my kingdom? Are you investing in things that perish or in things that last forever? Choose wisely, for every seed will bear fruit after its kind. Genesis 1:11. Plant yourself in my word. Plant yourself in faith. Plant yourself in righteousness, and you will flourish like a tree planted by the waters, whose leaves never wither, and whatever you do will prosper. Psalm 1:3. I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Matthew 28, verse 20. Number 3. Add divinity activities to your seed sowing. Unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it. Psalm 127:1. You can sow, you can toil, but without my hand upon it, the harvest will be small. Invite me into your work. Pray over your efforts. Seek first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added unto you. Matthew 6:33. Daniel did not rely on his wisdom alone. He prayed daily, seeking divine insight. Because of this, he became 10 times wiser than all the king's advisors. Daniel 1:20. Add prayer to your labor. Add fasting to your journey. Add faith to your work, and you will see the windows of heaven open. The story of Peter, sowing without me versus sowing with me. Peter and his companions fished all night and caught nothing. They were skilled fishermen. They knew the waters. They used their best efforts, but they labored in vain. Then I came. I said, cast your nets on the right side of the boat. And when they obeyed, they caught so many fish that their nets began to break. Luke 5:4-7, John 21:3-6. With me, your labor is never in vain. Without me, even the most experienced workers will fail. My presence makes all the difference. Acknowledge me in all your ways, and I will direct your paths. Proverbs 3:6. The story of Jehoshaphat, adding worship to warfare. King Jehoshaphat faced a mighty army. By human strength, he could not win. But instead of relying on swords and shields alone, he sought my face. He declared a fast, and his people prayed. 2 Chronicles 20:3-4. And then, instead of sending soldiers first, he sent worshippers to the battlefield. As they sang, I confused their enemies, and they destroyed themselves. My people did not even have to fight. 2 Chronicles 20:21-24. My child, when you add prayer and worship to your efforts, I fight your battles for you. Victory is not by might nor by power, but by my spirit. Zechariah 4:6. The story of Elijah, adding prayer to hard work. Elijah called for a showdown on Mount Carmel. The prophets of Baal built their altar, cried out to their God, and cut themselves in desperation, but nothing happened. 1 Kings 18:5-29. Then Elijah rebuilt my altar, laid the sacrifice, and soaked it with water. And he prayed, Lord, let it be known that you are God. And immediately fire fell from heaven and consumed the sacrifice. 1 Kings 18:36-38. My child, do not just labor in the flesh. Add prayer to your efforts. Call upon my name, and I will answer you and show you great and mighty things that you do not know. Jeremiah 33:3. The story of Moses, sowing obedience and trusting in me. Moses led my people out of Egypt, but they were trapped between the sea and Pharaoh's army. They had no boats, no weapons, no escape. But Moses did not panic. He lifted his staff and stretched out his hands in faith, and I parted the waters before them. Exodus 4:13-21. Obedience and faith invite my divine intervention. My child, when you face impossible situations, do not just work harder, seek me. Lift up your hands in prayer and watch me make a way where there is no way. The story of Paul and Silas, adding praise in prison. Paul and Silas were beaten and thrown into prison, but instead of complaining, they sang praises at midnight. And suddenly an earthquake shook the foundations of the prison, opening every door and breaking every chain. Acts 16:25-26. My child, never underestimate the power of worship in your struggles. Praise is not just a song, it is a weapon. When you praise, I move. When you worship, I set captives free. The story of Solomon, asking for wisdom first. Solomon had the opportunity to ask for anything, wealth, power, long life, but instead he asked for wisdom to lead my people. 1 Kings 3:5-9. And because he sought me first, I not only gave him wisdom, but I also blessed him with riches and honor beyond measure. 1 Kings 3:10-13. Seek first my kingdom and my righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. Matthew 6:33. Do not just chase success, chase my presence, and success will follow. The story of Gideon, trusting in my power. not human strength. Gideon prepared to fight the Midianites with thousands of soldiers. But I said, "You have too many men." And one by one, I reduced his army to just 300 men. Judges 7:2-7. Why? Because I wanted them to know that victory does not come from numbers, but from my power. My child, do not rely on human strength alone. Trust in my power. If I am for you, who can be against you? Romans 8:31. My child, you have worked, you have sown, but now will you invite me into your labor?